I think that story has been exaggerated over the years. It was 20-something years
100% accurate. We were out in Montauk, we're in the ocean, and I looked over at you and I said, "You're the man. I'm stepping down as president, and you're taking over." And if you measure your life by, do I have enough? You'll never have enough. I got to stay tough. Plus, I want to be the toughest guy on our team.
We might have a battle royale for who hosts the next podcast with us.
You know, they say the first million is brutal. The next million is inevitable. It's true.
Welcome to Beyond the First Million by Drucker Wealth. I'm your host, Gideon Drucker, and we have a super exciting episode, a treat today. My dad and the chairman of Drucker Wealth is with us. And if you like my stuff, my newsletter, this podcast, anything you hear me say, you're going to love this episode because pretty much everything I stole from this guy right here. Seriously though, this is a treat for me to get to do an episode with my role model, best friend, dad, business partner, everything in between, a huge reason I am where I am. Big guy, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to finally be on. I don't know how many podcasts you've done. Your mother had to call you, I called you, but here we are.
I think 18 of your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu buddies texted me, "Hey, love the podcast. Just wondering, when's your dad going to be on? We'd really like to see him on." Not going to be interviewing my dad as a financial advisor. Why my dad's on here is interviewing you as somebody who has reached financial independence, who has done most of the right things, right? Nobody's done everything right. And I think the key, that you're still working. You enjoy what we do. You love it. And for a lot of our clients, and this is something we're going to keep coming back to, being financially independent does not mean, oh, I never want to work again and I want to do nothing for the next 30 years. We hear it every day. Well, no, I kind of still want to work. I enjoy, just maybe not at the speed, not at the level that I've been grinding for 10, 20 years. So hearing somebody on the other side of that mountain that has made it and is excited about what you're doing day to day and just some of the takeaways that comes from that. But before we get into that side of it and where you're at now, where you're going, just tell us a little bit how you got your start, how you started Drucker Wealth, and your journey over the last 30, 40 years.
Most of my friends, smart guys, they wanted to be doctors. I saw my dad, who was a financial advisor of sorts, and I saw the lifestyle he had and what he did for us, and I said, yeah, I could probably do that. Graduated college, had a degree in accounting and finance. I would have killed myself if I became an accountant. I would have been the worst accountant. The IRS would have made me a poster boy. And I started off in the life insurance business. I got a reasonable brain, I got a good mouth, and I believed in it. I think life insurance didn't feed my soul though. Nobody wants to, for the most part, nobody wants to get a call from their insurance guy saying, "Hey, we need to talk."
Right. Yeah, I have a great update for you. It's about life insurance.
Right. But I was good and I was making money. And as my own personal income and net worth were increasing, I really liked the investing side. I mean, that kind of fed my soul. So
maybe just to give the audience, like, what time frame are we talking about here?
Probably 4 to 5 years in. Okay. I had made my bones. People bought insurance. They liked me. They trusted me. And I believed in it. And I bought insurance. And I still believe in it. But it was a little too rigid.
Right, just doing one thing.
Yeah. But I started getting into the investments on a personal level, and I said, yeah, I like this. This is fascinating. This is interesting. So I morphed to what the insurance side calls the dark side. And that was fun, because then when I was calling a client to talk about investments, they get off of me. I got to speak to my guy. And that's exactly how it was. The precursor to becoming a certified financial planner, CFP, was something called the CHFC. I got that because I wanted to be a professional. This is what I was going to do.
I'll jump in because you gave a lot of speeches back in the day. I saved all of them. Every now and then my wife will just find me reading a speech you gave from 1991. And everything that Jordan and I have spoke about on this podcast of becoming a student of the business, leaning into technology, building out different parts of the business. I mean, I don't want to say you had the script from day one, but pretty early, 1991, you gave a speech of why you needed to get a designation, right? To be an actual advisor to your clients. You were thinking about all of these things when you didn't have to. And it's cool hearing you talk about it now, but this isn't revisionist history. It's just you were ahead of the game, ahead of what a lot of people were thinking about at the time.
And I think, I don't care what you do. If you're a physician, if you're a scientist, if you're whatever you do for a living, the grind is real. I mean, it was 6 days a week and we had one car at the time. And mom would drop me off at one of the offices, it was a different office, and then go shopping for the day, which was the rest of our lives, and then pick me up after I'd had my meetings or whatever. And it was nights. And I remember at the beginning, you and your sister were young, you were babies. And I'm running out to an appointment at a kitchen table with clients. And I remember thinking, is it going to be worth it? Is this going to pay off? Because I was missing time with my family, which La Familia, most important thing for probably most people listening to this. Yeah. And, it turned out I was fortunate that it did pay off. So
it did. And we can talk about how it paid off now, but it even paid off as we got older, because you're saying, you miss things. I was a baby. I don't remember that. But what I do remember is, you being at every single sporting event, game, through elementary school, middle school, high school. You were the dad that came, games were at 3:00, our tennis matches, and you were at every one. So you hustled and grind and did what you need to do early. And I think this is something we talk about with clients, not to veer too much from your story, but there are ebbs and flows in our careers, right? There are times you put the gas down and you say, hey, I need to grind. And what I do now, right? I've heard you say, do in your 20s what other people won't. So you can do in your 30s and 40s what others can't. And you really embodied that. You work nights.
I said that?
You said that. It was pretty good.
Smart.
I mean, you might have taken it from somebody else. But
I have no original thoughts. I had one in 1987, but that was it.
Right, and we don't remember that.
No.
Okay.
No.
We're a family-oriented firm, and I think that shows in our team and how our whole firm works together. But we're becoming kind of a bigger ensemble. Was that something you wanted at the start? You didn't want? How did that evolve? And I feel like the answer is going to be I kind of roped you into that over the last few years. But tell us how you thought of that.
Not even a little bit. I wouldn't say no. I'd say hell no. In fact, I've always had coaches because I'm not that smart. And I've learned, the only thing I have learned is hire really smart people and have them teach you what they know. And it expedites everything from business to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which if you don't know, I'm a big...
I mentioned that earlier, but I'm sure we'll get a few more references.
So I had a coach and he said, how much in assets under management do you want to have one day? I said, I don't know. I don't think like that. He says, give me a number. I gave him a number. And he said, well, you realize you're going to have 17 people on your team. I said, 17 people? Are you out of your effing mind? I had like 3 people, and at the time, they were making my head hurt.
I mean, just to put that in perspective, and this applies to any business owner, anybody, you wanted to do the thing you were really good at. You wanted to sit in front of clients. You wanted to provide advice and build relationships. Managing people was not necessarily the dream.
And here we are now because you said, Dad, this is the direction we're going. And I said, giddy up.
And even just, as you were saying, the investment, the dark side is what maybe the insurance people call it. You like the idea of being able to give continual advice. And when you called, people were answered the phone and excited to speak. And as you were saying that, it made me think of us building the tax business, because taxes are the thing that you can give great financial advice, but if you're not looking at the tax return, if you don't have an insight into what's going on there, there's only so much you can give. And I think, if you look at our firm over the last 40 years, it's brick by brick. You don't do everything at once, right? It would fail. Like you wouldn't be good at giving advice if you tried to do all of it. But brick by brick, insurance, cash flow, investments, you really started us on the path of financial planning, of becoming a planning first firm. We're actually, now we're not going to talk about investments or insurance at all until we do financial planning. And now we're at that point of tax and estate planning. And to the idea, to bring this full circle, of when clients call, we can talk about all of that. There's nothing. My dream has always been, I don't want to have to ever say to a client, you're going to have to speak to your CPA, your attorney, or whatever. And it's taken a while to get there in multiple generations, but we're there. And that's a cool thing. And obviously what you and Poppy Bernie started. Moving a little bit to just your financial independence, right? Forget that you're an advisor. You're just like a lot of our clients that
regular yachts
made really good money. But how old are you?
62.
62. Maybe just share a little bit. Did you imagine that you'd be retired at this point? Did you have a number in mind of maybe what that would be? 10 years ago, 15 years ago, what was the vision? And then we can get to maybe what's changed, that vision has changed.
Yeah, everybody talks about putting your goals out there. So when I started in jiu-jitsu, my goal was never to be a black belt. It was just, frankly, to suck less, because I was getting crushed. I still get crushed. But now I'm a high-level jiu-jitsu guy. So
and what's the next belt you would get?
I'm a little bit away from black belt.
All right, you heard it here first.
And so that was never my goal, though. It was just to not get crushed as much. That was kind of my life. I never had a goal of I want $1 million, I want 5, I want 10, I want what. It was never about that. 2 things. The compounding effect of money. My dad used to say, it's the 8th wonder of the world. It truly is. They say the first $1 million is brutal. The next $1 million is inevitable. It's true. It's just the compounding. It's kind of like that story. When I used to do a lot of public speaking, I'd say, hey, I'll give you $100,000 today, or I'll give you $1. And we're going to double that dollar every day for a month. And at the end of that month, you're going to have north of $5 million. And most of the growth happens in the last week of the month.
Right, the last few days.
Right. That's the secret. My favorite book back in the day, The Millionaire Next Door. by Stanley and Danko. Got to play good defense, meaning you got to make money. That's the grind. Good defense is live below your means. One of the really interesting things I raised my family is in a nice town, kind of a bougie town. Nobody knew what I did, and nobody had any idea how well or not that I was doing.
You truly never cared what the house looked like, the cars, not that we didn't have a nice house, but for as competitive as you are and just how motivated you are to just crush everything you're doing, that was all true. But it truly, I can say, it was all inside of you. Like, you just never gave a shit if the rest of the town knew how much money you had, knew how financially independent you were becoming. And it wasn't a driver for you. You wanted to take care of your family and everything else.
In one of our other favorite books, Psychology of Money, the author talks about the story of Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Heller, were famous authors, and they had been invited to somebody they knew who was a hedge fund guy who owned a house, but it's an island off of the North Fork of Long Island. And they go there, and it's a magnificent house. And they're walking through it, the view of the ocean and everything in it. And Kurt Vonnegut says to Joseph Heller, do you realize this guy made more this year than we're the two top-selling authors of all time have made in our whole careers? And Joseph Heller says, yeah, I do realize that. He goes, but do you realize we have something he'll never have? He goes, what could that possibly be? Look around. And he said, enough. And that's the challenge, I think, for most people. How do you know when you have enough? What does enough look like? Is it, 5 cars? Is it a huge house? Is it a beach house? And if you measure your life by, do I have enough? You'll never have enough.
So what was enough for you? Was retirement part of the dream of, hey, at X, because you said it wasn't about a dollar amount, maybe net worth wise, but was it a age? Like, how did you think about working versus not because of how hard you'd work?
Yeah, so, you brought it up a few times, and clients will say, or people at jiu-jitsu especially will say, hey, you're retired, right? I ain't retired. I had a Park Avenue corner office, suite of offices for my team. It was great. And I had to commute every day. It was sucking the soul out of me. And then COVID happened. And they said, hey, you can't come in. You have to work remote. And it turns out we could work remote. Right. And we are a virtual firm. And as horrible as COVID was, and it was the best thing for me because I don't commute. And that changed everything. My day, my life is my own. That gave me true freedom, mental freedom anyway. I'm not retired. And I, one of my good friends, he talked about the mistake his dad made was he retired and he was no longer relevant or engaged. I can't imagine a universe where I'm no longer relevant or engaged. It may happen. I get a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I'm walking around in my underwear or no underwear. That can happen. But short of that, I will always be involved. And, they say the best leaders are the ones who know when it's time to step up. About 3 years ago, we were out in Montauk, we're in the ocean, and I looked over at you and I said, you're the man. He says, I appreciate that. I said, no, literally, you're the man. And you said, what does that mean? I said, I'm stepping down as president and you're taking over. And since then, you've been running shit. I had to, call you a dozen times, and your mother had to call you 20 times to get on this friggin' podcast, but here we are. But I get to do the things that I like to do. That is the ultimate definition of financial independence, to be able to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, for as long as you want.
And does it feel different working now? And you've been financially independent, I think, for, it's not like that happened last year for a while, but does it feel different? And again, we're trying to bring this to the audience, right? They're in their 40s, they're working and they're grinding, and some of them, they know they want to keep doing this for a long time. They love what they do. The idea of sitting on a beach doing nothing, and I know we're both wired like this, you do it for 2 days. I did it on my honeymoon for 2 days, and then I was writing out business plans for the next week and a half when we were laying on the beach. It's how we're wired. It's how a lot of, I think, type A, high income, right? The clients that we typically work with. But does it feel different doing what you do now that you're financially independent and it's really not about the paycheck than before?
I've sent this video to everyone who's in my newsletter a couple weeks ago, the actual video. There's a movie with Mark Wahlberg called The Gambler. Shitty movie, but this one...
But great scene. Yeah.
But this scene. And John Goodman is basically opining about how you've got to build FU money. That America was built on saying F you. F you, I don't need you as a client. So financial independence for me doesn't mean that I don't work, doesn't mean I don't take clients' calls, doesn't mean any of that. But it means that I have enough that if I don't like somebody, they're not fun, they're not nice, they're not good people, they can go F themselves. I don't care. It means I do a rant every week that my clients get. I get more shit about that rant from the things that I say, whatever. And I'm not looking to offend anyone. I just don't give a shit. Not to be mean, but the idea that I I've made myself financially independent.
So you talked about what it's taken you to get here. You've worked with a lot of successful clients as well. For, let's paint the picture. Somebody's 40, they're 45, they're in that period of life. Kids under college, let's say, right? That could be a range. What's the advice you would give somebody that is just so and it could be financial, it could be family, it could be anything. That's just like, they can't think about the big picture because they're stuck so much in the here and now. What advice would you give yourself even where you were 20 years ago?
I was very fortunate. I saw, my dad made a priority of family, and that was the most important thing. I didn't just go to your games. Your mother and I coached, your travel team, your rec team, your sister. It was a gift because I got to meet your friends. That was really important.
Let's stay on that actually for a second. Talk about our house growing up and something, and I've written about this before, that, our house, it was the house that all the kids, wanted to be at. And you and mom set that precedent at a really young age. So again, this kind of has nothing to do with financial planning, but your parents of young kids, like making your house feel not like a museum, right? Not like you have to worry about every little thing that kids want to go to. You start that young, and I'm thinking from a very young age, we were there. And then I remember in high school, and my friends felt close enough to you that somebody has girl trouble. They're literally asking you, hey, can your dad come in? I think he could help with this whole, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And that's lasted, my fraternity brothers, all of my friends. How do you think about that? What did you do right that allowed you to get to that point later on?
The best compliment I ever got was somebody said, you're not judgmental. And I think about Ted Lasso, where he said, be curious, not judgmental. My house wasn't a museum. You go into homes, you got to take your shoes off. Your sister, my daughter, she wants me to take my shoes off when I go into her house. It doesn't matter. Yeah. I don't take my shoes off. That's just not happening.
He really doesn't. We all do, and Lance is committed.
So you come into my house, and I have a beautiful home now, and it's really, I don't care. I'm not going to make you take your shoes off. I think it's crazy. I understand why people do it, but on a personal level, I think it's batshit crazy. I want people to feel comfortable. My home is your home. Honestly, can't just be words.
Yeah. I just saw Karina in the background. You're never invited to Karina's home. I can promise you that. But.
For a myriad of reasons, and I understand that. Be comfortable. Make it comfortable. Don't be judgmental. That's
yeah. Really. No, that really was the amount of things over the years that friends and even people on the team or colleagues would share with you that, they would, is just
very fortunate.
Yeah, that's a helpful thing. What's next for you? How do you think about these next few years? And even maybe a little insight of how you're helping clients at this point. Like the way Jordan and I might run meetings when we're talking about scenario planning around education and changing jobs and dual income to one, your clients are at a different point. What's kind of the crux of the meetings that you talk about with retirees?
Yeah, so I have actually two tranches of clients. Clients who are near or at retirement. That's one. And I still have some people in their 40s and 50s who are still building it, and they're killing it. They're doing really well. The vantage point that I have is I've been there.
Yeah.
And I've had clients that I met in their 20s, and I've been there. So for the younger people, I can say, hey, I'm your advisor and you're paying me. Listen to me, don't listen to me, don't give a shit. I'm not validated by you doing it or not, but I'm telling you may want to pay attention here. And they do. And that's really gratifying. The clients who are at or near retirement, the most important thing is not you have 5 million, 10 million, 20 million. Doesn't matter. It's how much income can your assets generate. So if you have NVIDIA and Amazon, which don't pay dividends, that's great. But how do you monetize that? Well, you got to sell stock. Yeah, but then you got to pay capital gains and so our clients, as they're getting closer or near retirement, what's really important is building a portfolio that generates income. So where does that come from? Owning big blue chip stocks that pay you to own them. Market shits the bed and goes down 30%. Who cares? They're still getting that dividend. Owning protected income things like annuities. Fantastic. Well, it's a lousy investment. Sure.
It's not meant to be an investment.
It's generating income. So for me, I have built my net worth in such a way that I can generate more income than your mother and I can spend, and we can gift, and we can be philanthropic. That's a really big one. I've always been philanthropic, but I guess it's a matter of amounts.
Right. And
right.
impact.
And impact, right.
At the start, you're doing it because you want to get started. And even to that, I don't remember, you'll have to tell the story. You were at an event where you gave like a very little because you were in your 20s, you had a family, maybe.
It was a UJA meeting. Some guy stands up and he says, hey, when I first started, I was given $50 a month or $50 a year. That's all I could afford. And now I'm giving a ridiculous amount. And I remember I was like 22 years old, and so I stood up and I said, $50. And then every year they had this luncheon, it was once a year, and every year I'd raise it. And every year my business kept increasing. I'm not saying there was a correlation, but I wasn't going to be the person who found out.
Right.
So I just kept raising it and life's been good. And then I was the person years later where I said, hey, I went to a meeting, somebody stood up and said this.
Giving people the freedom to say, hey, this person just gave 100,000. You don't want to stand up and say you're giving, 1,000, 50, 100 bucks a month. And that's something we experience with our clients. Like a lot of our clients like giving back and some can give more than others, but it's starting the habit that feels good. And there's something about giving the things you really care about that's motivating. Oh, I want to be able to give. So yeah, is it like a cause and effect or like where you karma? Maybe not, but there is something of, hey, you think about what's money for? It's I want to take care of my family. I want to contribute to things I really care about. Just to stay on that income piece, because I think that's probably just your experience of being an advisor is yes, growth matters. And for most of the clients we work with, we are focused on how do they grow their wealth 10, 20, 30 years out in the future. But once you're retired or getting close, that peace of mind of knowing, hey, market's going to do what it's going to do, but I have enough income. My income is higher than my living expenses. I don't know that there's a better feeling. What is financial independence if not that?
That's FU money, baby.
Why should everybody do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Why is that a life-changing? Sure. And I say that tongue in cheek, but I know you really think that. And, you're getting my nephews and niece, your grandkids, you want them to start.
I mean, it doesn't have to be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it probably should be.
Yeah.
Do hard things. When you first start, it's miserable. You get your ass kicked every single day and you don't even know what's going on. And then little by little, you start learning stuff. And the group, you can't cheat in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I used to play tennis, tournaments and whatnot. Everybody cheated. I've never picked up a golf club in my life.
Anybody we want to call out by name or we've gotten over it?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're on a list.
Yeah, sure.
Golf, I understand a lot of people cheat. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there's no cheating. It's the most honest thing you can do. And if somebody's not a decent human being, it comes out real quick. So the people that are left, all different, cops, doctors, whatever they are, they're decent human beings. So you're with a great group of people. And, physically, right now, everything hurts. This finger, that's as much as I can.
We want to zoom in on his gross, disgusting finger.
Physically changes your life, emotionally, mentally, and it makes you more resilient.
Yeah, I think that's also a good lesson. You're in your 30s and 40s, is you and mom both were always, you took care of yourselves physically. Mom just did a marathon, was 5 years ago. She's run my whole life. Every vacation we've ever been on when we grew up, we've ran, worked out in the morning. And Gabby, my sister and I, like maybe her a little bit more than me at this exact moment of time, have gotten really good at, no, you got to do something for you. Like growing up, you played tennis every morning. You were doing it at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. So before you were a dad and then going to work, right? You weren't neglecting other parts of your life, but it was always important that you physically took care of yourself, had hobbies, had things you were into. And I think that was a really good learning lesson for Gabby and I growing up.
What do they say? You can't love somebody else if you don't love yourself. So self-care is like really important. That's also a big change. Now that I'm in my 60s, going to the dermatologist and the cardiologist and I remember my dad, as soon as he retired, he started going to the doctor like every week, it seemed. I'm not there yet, but you realize you could have all the money in the world. It's something everybody always says, but it's really true. And physicality, I expect to be able to kick the shit out of my grandsons and granddaughter for many years to come. When that turns, that's
to be clear, they're 5, 4, and 2.
Yeah, but
so
they're tough.
It's not saying a lot.
And they
right
also
now,
they attack as a block. It's not. I'm not fighting just one person.
Yeah.
I got to stay tough. Plus, I want to be the toughest guy on our team.
Lance just looked at Jordan off camera. We might have a battle royale for who hosts the next podcast with us. Anything you wanted to share? Not that you're not going to be back. We're going to do a bunch of episodes.
I got it.
Yeah.
I was fortunate. My dad lost his dad when he was 16. My uncle Herb was off was World War II. And, he was overseas. And my dad became the man. He was the first one in his family to go to college. Right? Yeah, taking care of his mom and his sister. He created this, you work hard, you grind. The generation that they wanted to be given, I got big issues with that. I told you and your sister I wasn't going to reward mediocrity. Yep. Meaning, if you guys didn't grind in college, in high school. In high school, if you didn't have a job, by the way, that is the premier indicator of future success. Having a job when you're in high school, to all the parents out there, make sure your kids get jobs.
And maybe just because you're mentioning it, what's important about that? And because I worked and I think I've talked about it on a podcast, but visited me in my one and only day working in the bagel shop.
Gideon wanted to create a business and and I said, hey, you got to create a business plan. And he did, and you did all that. And then you started giving tennis lessons and it was great. And then one of the dads on the tennis team liked Gideon a lot and he owned a bagel store. And he said, hey, would you like to work on my bagel store? He said, sure. So it was a Saturday and you were working 4 hours So I said, I will let you go for 2 hours. And then I wanted to come in and just get a bagel. And I come in and Gideon has a...
I don't know why. I knew where you were going to go with this story. Why would I do this?
And he's shoving the knife in the toaster.
This isn't true.
And I'm saying, oh, dear God, he's going to die at his first day on job and set the place on fire. And then he got his first paycheck. And he said, do you know how much they took out of my paycheck? Yes, I do. From that, he said, well, being a business owner, you work for yourself, you depend on nobody and nothing, and it's basically how much brains and how much other things you have and bring to the table and how hard are you willing to grind.
I think that story has been exaggerated over the years. It was 20-something years
100% accurate.
To your point, I would say, because most of our clients, right, are W-2 are not business owners, but there's a degree of you don't like what you're doing, right? Find something better, develop a skill set, find the firm that allows you to do what you really want to do. I remember Jordan first started at Drucker Wealth that you like the idea of entrepreneurship, which was Jordan's way of saying, hey, he likes building, developing, having ideas, contributing, but within an organization, right? So there are ways of having that business owner mindset of, I got to play tennis every day, 4 days a week with kids that were I just got to hit and play tennis. And then, the second part of that is when my sister wanted to join the business, I told her I was going to sell her. She could buy in and I would sell her part of the recurring revenues because I'd been doing it for 2 to 3 summers. And I think you smacked me and said, you're not selling the business to your sister.
2 things. I said, number 1, shut the F up.
Yeah.
And I did smack him in the head. I said, number 2, I bought the tennis balls, I bought the racket, I bought the stringing machine, so you're going to give your sister the business, and she's not paying you any vig. This ain't the mob.
That is how that went. But this idea of create the job. So you say work in high school, that can be at Staples or my friends worked at, but it can also be something that you're passionate about, that you're interested in, that is a little bit more rewarding. But yes, doing something that sucks for a little bit of time, I think about my Army service in that way. Doing something that sucks is not the worst thing for your future growth.
Gerald Ford, who was one of the presidents, most people don't realize that, but he was. And his father said to him one summer, I need you to find the worst job in the world. Whatever the worst thing is, I need you to do that. He goes, why? He goes, I'll tell you later. So he gets a job painting warehouses in the sun in the summer. So the sun would beat on the warehouse. He's painting it. He's getting broiled. It's like 1,000,000,000 degrees. It was miserable. His arms hurt. It was dangerous. He finishes the summer out and he says to his father, why did you want me to do that? He goes, were you miserable? He goes, every day. He goes, did you quit? He goes, no. He goes, that's a good lesson. He goes, so study, don't screw around in school, be smart, work hard, get a good job so you don't have to do that. So I always thought that was a great thing. I think the last thing that I was thinking about, what's the best thing that now this Lance does for my clients? And it's always been like that, but now it really is. Brutal effing honesty. We had a call yesterday with a client that she's done a great job. She's in great shape. She has a pied-à-terre in California. She lives in Manhattan. And I say, where do you sit on the plane? She goes, what do you mean? I said, you know what I mean. Where do you sit? She goes, well, I always want to go in the first class, but I said, sweetheart, if I find out you're not sitting in the front of the plane in first class, you ain't gonna be my client anymore. We're gonna fire you. She goes, I can do that? I said, yeah, you can. And she got, literally, she started tearing up. That's the gift. The ability that we've worked with her for a long time. She's in a great position. She can go friggin' first class, sit in the front with the peasants and coach.
Those of you listening that are 20 years away from that, and maybe not first class, but just that stage of life, there's definitely something I've seen it. I started sitting in on your meetings, but if you've been saving your entire life, right? Even honestly, this is a conversation I have with you when I tell you to spend your money that you've worked so hard for, that if you've lived a certain way for 20, 30 years of, I need to save, I need to build my wealth, I need to invest, it can become really difficult. You're in your 60s, your 70s of saying, all right, I can loosen the reins a little bit. I can spend my money
very hard
because you've built this mentality. Well, no, I need to save it for a rainy day. And then you get to a point, well, now isn't maybe a rainy day, but now is when you get to enjoy. And not that you do everything you want, but I'm always saying, hey, you've gotten to this point. So what you do for your client, that is a real thing, right? That story, I'm sure it's one story, but in different ways that happens over and over every day because your clients got to a point doing one thing. Part of your job is helping them spend money. Everybody helps save. How do you help somebody spend money? And that's what you and
yeah, but it goes the other way because a call right before that was with another person who's very successful, but he's miserable. Not a happy camper right now. He doesn't know if it's going to continue. And I said, you're going to have to make some life decisions. I said, and is your wife on board? I happen to be speaking with him. Normally it was both of them. And so sometimes that brutal honesty. What does a good financial advisor do? Puts you in an index fund? Well, we do that. We're not putting a man on the moon here. Tax loss harvesting, all that stuff is important. That's a seat at the table. What a good advisor really does is doesn't buy into your bullshit and says, hey, you're hiring me to tell you what to do. You can do whatever you want, but I don't know why you'd pay me if you don't listen to me. It's like you go to the doctor and he says, hey, you got to stop drinking Coke, eating potato chips, smoking cigarettes. Got it. And then you're on the way home, you stop at the deli to get the bag of potato chips, the Coke, and you got the cigarettes.
He gave you a good idea.
Yeah, so like it was good to think about, but you ain't doing it.
All right, with that, you will be back. All jokes aside, we'll do...
When am I coming back?
We're going to talk about it. I need
By the way, just so we're all clear, this entire thing is being filmed in my home. So that's chutzpah. If you're not sure what that means, look it up. It's an Italian phrase. But telling me I'll be back to my own home, that's balls.
Thanks for being here, big guy. Thanks for everything else along the way, more importantly.
That's what.
And we'll speak to you next week. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and more to come. Thanks, everybody.